Welcome, weary traveler of thought. Wherever you are, tucked beneath warm sheets, bathed in soft lamplight, or listening gently as your mind begins to wander, allow yourself to drift quietly into the past. Tonight, we'll set sail not on the thrilling waves of romanticized adventure, but into the quieter, soft, warm rhythms of real piracy. Not Hollywood pirates, but creaking decks, mildew-drenched hammocks, whispered threats, and long stretches of waiting. This will not be a tale of treasure maps and daring escapes. Instead, it is a slow unraveling of what it truly meant to live and survive at the mercy of the sea. We begin our journey not as a pirate, but as a prisoner, shackled, shivering, eyes squinting into the sun, wondering what fate these unpredictable men have planned. You'll smell damp wood, old salt, and something far less pleasant lingering in the bilge. And above it all, a crew of hard-faced sailors, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, deciding if you are worth the food you eat. And from there, we'll explore their leaders, their strange rules, their lost traditions, and those who tried to stop them. Now let the waves carry us gently back to the sea. Imagine yourself bound at the wrists with rough hemp rope that bites into your skin every time the ship rolls. You're sitting upright, lashed to the mainmast of a vessel you've never seen before, its timbers gray with age, sails patched with mismatched cloth, the scent of seawater and sweat mixing in the heavy air. Around you, the crew moves with a lazy precision, eyes barely sparing you a glance. You are cargo now, an uncertain investment, a burden. Your last memory on land was a merchant vessel, dull but safe. Perhaps you had been an apprentice clerk, or a cabin boy, or a mid-ranking officer with little coin to your name. Now you are something else, something less. Morning comes in streaks of pale sunlight that filters through the ratlines above you. The sky, wide and endless, offers no answers. You can't tell where you are, only that you're too far from land, and that the pirates have taken your name, your possessions, and your choices. The ship groans as it turns slightly into the wind. A spray of sea salt dusts your face. It dries your lips and stings the cracked skin beneath your eyes. You shift your weight to relieve the pressure on your spine, but there's little room to move. Hunger has already begun to gnaw at you. The water you've had has the tang of old wood and algae, and sleep comes only in snatches, too brief to provide rest, too deep to be peaceful. Somewhere above, the cook yells to his assistant. The crew begins its day. Their footsteps are heavy but not hurried. You hear laughter, curses, the clang of a pan, the creak of rope over pulley. No one speaks to you. As the day unfolds, you begin to learn their rhythm. Pirates live by tides and instinct. Breakfast is salted fish, often eaten with their hands. If you're offered any, it's thrown toward your feet with a grunt. You eat it where you sit or not at all. Occasionally, someone will speak to you. A half joke, a threatening whisper, or a quiet moment of kindness. The pirate crew is not a single mind. It is a shifting patchwork of motives and moods. One man may untie your hands so you can work. Another may suggest you'd fetch a better ransom if you still had all your fingers. And yes, you will be made to work. Not because they trust you, but because extra hands are always needed at sea. One day, you are bailing out water in the belly of the ship, your arms burning from the motion. The next, you are helping to patch sailcloth with coarse thread. Your ankles may still be shackled, but your usefulness might earn you another day of life. Another day of breath. The nights are the worst. Below deck, air becomes thick and damp, warm with the breath of sleeping men and the scent of unwashed skin. If you sleep at all, it is on damp boards or spare canvas. Rats scurry near your face. Someone coughs through the night, their wheezing rhythmic as a clock. And sometimes someone wakes up screaming, not from violence but from dreams. Even pirates are haunted. Storms come too. The sky turns black and the deck turns slick. You're tied again, for safety they say, to keep you from going overboard. But the fear isn't the sea. The fear is the pirates themselves. Their eyes glint differently in the stormlight. Superstition rides higher than reason. A whisper that you are bad luck could send you over the side. But not all are cruel. Some men on board may have once been prisoners themselves. They remember what it's like. They might share food. They might untie your arms on a calm day. They might even speak to you, not as a captive but as a person. Eventually you learn their names, their stories. One lost his family and turned pirate for revenge. Another simply liked the freedom. Some want gold, some want nothing. Most just want to stay alive, just like you. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your status shifts. From cargo to laborer, from laborer to tolerated presence. And sometimes from tolerated presence to crewmate. But that comes with choices. And those choices have weight. A prisoner might be set free, but a prisoner who joins the crew is something else entirely. You stop being someone who was taken. The sea is quiet now, the wind rests. The sails, once taut with tension, hang a little looser against the sky. And in this stillness we step ashore, not into safety, but into a courtroom. The year is 1720. The place, Spanish town Jamaica, a small but important colonial outpost nestled into the humid edges of empire. The trial you are about to witness is not especially long, nor especially just. But it will be remembered, whispered, and retold. For this is the story of Calico Jack Rackham, Anne Bonny, and Mary Read, pirates whose lives danced on the ragged edges of myth and lore. Let's begin not with the verdict, but with the man at the center. John Rackham, better known by his nickname, Calico Jack. The name came from his fondness for bright patterned clothing made from cheap printed cotton, known as calico. He wasn't known for being particularly ruthless, nor especially cunning. He wasn't the richest pirate, nor the most feared, but he had charisma, a slow-burning charm. He wore his rebellion lightly, and he attracted those who did the same. Before his final voyage, Rackham had already brushed up against notoriety. He had once served under Charles Vane, a pirate known for his violence and volatility. When Vane refused to engage a French warship out of cowardice, it was Rackham who led the mutiny that deposed him. For this, he was granted command by vote, a reminder that pirate ships, unlike naval vessels, often operated more like floating republics than kingdoms. But Rackham's most enduring fame would come not from who he was, but from who sailed with him. Anne Bonny was not the typical pirate companion. Born around 1700, likely in Ireland, and later raised in South Carolina, she was the illegitimate daughter of a lawyer and his maid. She grew up strong-willed and sharp-tongued, often defying the genteel roles expected of her. Eventually, she ran off with Rackham, disguising herself as a man when necessary, bearing arms and reportedly fighting alongside the crew, not just as a passenger, but as an equal. She was joined by another woman, Mary Read, who had lived much of her life in disguise as a man, serving in the British military before turning to piracy. The two women, according to surviving accounts, fought fiercely in battle, sometimes more fiercely than the men. Their ship, Revenge, was a modest sloop, nimble and lightly armed, designed more for speed than confrontation. They sailed the waters between the Bahamas and Cuba, harassing small merchant vessels and avoiding large naval encounters. It wasn't glory they sought. It was survival, freedom, and the strange kind of power that came from answering to no flag but their own. But it would not last. In October 1720, their ship was ambushed while anchored near Negril, Jamaica. It was late at night. Many of the crew were drunk, unprepared for battle. The attacking vessel, commanded by privateer Jonathan Barnett on behalf of the British governor, fired a warning shot, then closed in. What followed, according to witnesses, was chaos. Most of Rackham's crew hid below deck. Only Anne Bonny, Mary Read, and perhaps one or two others fought back. The rest surrendered without resistance. They were captured, imprisoned, and tried in Spanish Town under charges of piracy. The courtroom was cramped, wooden, humid. There was no jury in the modern sense. Evidence came in the form of testimonies and letters. But the outcome was already clear. Rackham was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. When granted a final meeting with Anne, he reportedly begged for her forgiveness. She is said to have replied, quietly, calmly, that she was sorry to see him there. But if he had fought like a man, he wouldn't be hanging like a dog. There is no record of his reply. He was executed in November 1720. His body, like many pirates, was tarred and hung in chains in a public gibbet, meant not just to kill, but to send a message. But what of Anne Bonny and Mary Red? Their fates took an unexpected turn. When sentenced, both women pleaded their bellies, a legal phrase meaning they were pregnant. It was an accepted way to delay execution. Killing a woman carrying a child was seen as a separate offense, and so both were granted stays. Mary Read died in prison, likely of fever. She was never executed. Anne Bonny, on the other hand, simply disappears from the records. No execution date, no burial, no final statement. Some speculate she was quietly released, perhaps through the influence of her father or other colonial connections. Others think she may have taken a new name, settled into obscurity, and lived a very different life. But the trial itself, brief, theatrical, and steeped in contradiction, left a lasting impression. Calico Jack became a cautionary tale. His flag, a skull with crossed cutlasses, would later be adopted into pirate iconography. And Anne Bonny and Mary Read became symbols of rebellion, of blurred identity, of the strange intersections between law and legend. Their story was not one of victory, nor even of tragedy. It was something quieter, a moment when real people brushed up against the myth of piracy and left behind fragments of truth, tangled forever with fiction. And now, as the trial ends and the ship's ropes creak once more in your ears, we sail onward into deeper waters. Beneath the chaos and lawlessness so often associated with pirates, there existed something surprising, something orderly, something almost bureaucratic. Pirate codes, not whispered legends, not fanciful stories of buried treasure or secret maps, but actual written rules agreed upon by the crew, signed sometimes by dozens of hands. These were not laws imposed by kings, but contracts crafted by outlaws, tailored to the harsh, drifting world they occupied. Tonight, let us examine those curious documents. Were they real? What did they say? And most intriguingly, did anyone actually follow them? We begin with the idea of articles. Each pirate ship, upon forming its crew or setting out to sea, would often draft its own articles of agreement. These were more than guidelines. They were sacred on board. To break them was to court punishment, not from outside forces, but from your own crewmates. Imagine yourself below deck, surrounded by candlelight, the air thick with pipe smoke and salt. You sit cross-legged beside a rough wooden table. Around you, men, some scarred, some young, most sun-darkened and wary, lean in close as a scribe. Often the quartermaster or another literate hand reads out the code. You nod your agreement and, perhaps awkwardly, scrawl your name or an X at the bottom. Each ship's code varied, but some rules repeated across crews. Let's drift through a few of them now quietly. One common rule: no fighting aboard the ship. Disagreements were expected, inevitable even, but violence was to be avoided while at sea. If tempers flared, the matter would be settled on land, through a duel or another agreed form of combat, often with pistols at 20 paces. The crew could not afford internal bloodshed. Unity was survival. Another rule often detailed the division of plunder. On many ships, captains received a slightly larger share, followed by the quartermaster. But the rank-and-file pirates still earned far more than any sailor in a navy or merchant crew. The promise of equality, relative equality, was one of the things that drew men to piracy in the first place. In a world ruled by rigid social hierarchies, the pirate ship was, by comparison, startlingly democratic. Then there were injury clauses. If a pirate lost a limb in battle, they were often compensated from the shared loot. A lost leg might be worth 500 pieces of 8, a lost arm, 600. It was crude insurance, but it was more than most navies offered. Some codes banned gambling, others prohibited bringing women aboard. Some ships allowed music, designating specific hours when fiddlers were to play for the crew. Others enforced a curfew, even at sea, to ensure discipline. These rules weren't fantasies. They were often enforced with sharp consistency. Punishments ranged from fines to marooning, a quiet and terrible fate that left a man alone on a barren sandbar with a musket, a bottle of water, and little else. It was not execution, but it was rarely survivable. But now, let's ask something gentler. Why did pirates, of all people, have codes in the first place? The answer is both practical and deeply human. Piracy was dangerous. It was unstable. Crews were made up of men from different nations, races, and languages. Some had fled oppression, others had committed crimes. Still more had simply wanted freedom from grinding poverty. In such an environment, structure wasn't just helpful, it was essential. The code created predictability, safety, even a sense of fairness. On land, most of these men had lived under harsh rulers, cruel captains, or indifferent kings. But on a pirate ship, you could vote for your captain. You could challenge decisions, and if needed, you could leave. But not all codes were created equal, and not all pirates followed them. Some captains, like Blackbeard, operated more through fear and spectacle than consensus. Others, like Bartholomew Roberts, were known for strict discipline and regular prayer. It depended on the crew, the time, the sea. Over the centuries, stories of pirate codes grew more romantic. Popular fiction, from Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island to modern films, portrayed them as ancient, mysterious laws. But in truth, they were often practical checklists. Simple rules, nothing more but also nothing less. Few original copies survive. Most of what we know comes from court records, testimony, and secondary accounts. Still, one copy attributed to Captain Roberts includes this line: "Every man shall have an equal vote in affairs of moment. He shall have an equal title to the fresh provisions or strong liquors at any time seized." Not thrilling, not poetic, but quietly revolutionary. In a world built on kings and crowns, pirates created something flatter. So next time you picture a pirate, imagine not just the sword or the parrot, but the ink-stained fingers. The quiet reading of the rules, the slow nods of agreement, and the knowledge that even among outlaws, order finds a way. Let that thought rock gently in your mind, like a hammock on the waves. Imagine yourself stepping away from the creaking wooden decks and salt-stiffened sails, and instead walking down a stone-paved path lined with palm trees and blooming jasmine. The air here is heavy, but not with sea spray, rather with the faint perfume of citrus groves and freshly baked bread. This is the world of colonial governors and wealthy merchants who watched the pirate-infested waters from their seaside mansions. During the early 18th century, these colonial officials represented the crown's distant reach into the New World. Their lives, though touched by the threat of piracy, were worlds apart from the salt and struggle of the pirate crew. Take, for example, Woodes Rogers, appointed as the royal governor of the Bahamas in 1718. His mission was clear: to restore order to the lawless pirate haven of Nassau and to offer clemency to those willing to abandon their outlaw ways. Imagine the weight of his position. The responsibility to balance justice with diplomacy, the constant vigilance against sudden pirate raids, and the delicate dance of power among the colonial elite. Rogers was a former privateer himself, so he understood the sea's harsh demands and the allure of freedom that piracy promised. Inside his mansion, grand but unpretentious, Rogers held councils with other governors, merchants, and military officers. The rooms echoed with the quiet murmur of negotiations, plans for naval patrols, and letters from the crown. Portraits of monarchs hung on paneled walls, a reminder of the faraway throne. The elite lived comfortably, their days structured by protocol, social rituals, and the rhythms of commerce. Their tables were laden with imported wines, salted meats, and exotic fruits shipped from Europe and the Caribbean plantations. Yet beneath this veneer of calm and refinement lay constant anxieties: the threat of pirate attack, rebellion among enslaved peoples, and the fragility of distant royal favor. The elite lived comfortably, their days structured by protocol, social rituals, and the rhythms of commerce. Their tables were laden with imported wines, salted meats, and exotic fruits shipped from Europe and the Caribbean plantations. Yet beneath this veneer of calm and refinement lay constant anxieties: the threat of pirate attack, rebellion among enslaved peoples, and the fragility of distant royal favor. Governors like Rogers issued pardons, official documents offering clemency to pirates who surrendered. These pardons were tools of statecraft, but also symbols of uneasy coexistence. One day, a man might be offered mercy and welcome into respectable society. The next, he could be hunted down as a fugitive. Meanwhile, wealthy merchants financed anti-pirate expeditions and profited from the trade that piracy both disrupted and, paradoxically, sometimes enabled. Their ledgers tracked the flow of sugar, rum, and slaves. The ports thrummed with the movement of goods, sailors, and rumors. Contrast this life with that of the pirate prisoner you imagined earlier, tied to a mast or rowing endlessly below deck. Here the air is cooler, the burdens more subtle but no less real. Power has its own chains. Social gatherings, filled with polite conversation and carefully measured glances, masked the tense negotiations that decided the fate of colonies, and sometimes of lives. As dusk falls on these quiet estates, imagine the distant sound of a ship's bell, a reminder of the restless sea just beyond the garden walls. A world apart, yet always connected. The elite's stories are not of battle cries or buried treasure, but of administration, influence, and survival in a world where the line between law and lawlessness was often thin and shifting. As the waves lap softly against the worn hulls of pirate ships and the evening breeze stirs the jasmine-scented gardens of distant mansions, imagine yourself settling into a comfortable place, safe, warm, and far from the salt and struggle of centuries past. Tonight, we have traveled through the lives of those caught between freedom and captivity, lawlessness and order, hardship and power. You walked barefoot through the dust-choked decks, felt the sting of salt water against skin blistered by toil. You listened to the murmur of ink-scribed codes, binding rogues together in fragile unity. And finally, you glimpsed the polished halls, where governors measured their authority in quiet decisions, far from the roar of cannon fire. The world of the pirate's prisoner was one of hardship, uncertainty, and a constant struggle for survival. Yet even in that turmoil, order emerged. Not through kings or courts, but through men who dared to write their own rules. In contrast, the colonial elite lived by different rules, shaped by privilege and protocol. Their comforts, though real, were shadowed by the ever-present tension of governing lands restless with rebellion, piracy, and change. Now imagine yourself breathing deeply, the rhythm slow and even. The distant ocean hums a lullaby, carrying away the harshness and unrest of the past. Your mind may drift softly, cradled by the gentle cadence of history's quieter stories. Rest here, in the calm comfort of the present moment, knowing that the storms of yesteryear have given way to peaceful seas. Thank you for taking this journey to a time when life was raw and uncertain, yet strangely ordered by men on the edges of law and empire. May your dreams be as steady as the tide, and your sleep as deep as the ocean's hush. Good night.